Okay, guys, in deference for everybody's time, it won't be an official meeting till Lucretia gets here. She called in and said she'd be about 15 minutes late.
Okay.
When she comes, we'll adopt minutes and call the real meeting to order, but we'll go ahead and start. Al's not in the parking lot. He's not answering his cell phone, and he had said he was coming tonight. So we don't know if he's, in the wrong place or what, but
Oh, yeah.
since we're not voting, and Lucretia's done this before. Last time we went through things line by line. She'll catch up. So if you want, we'll go ahead and start. Maddie, you've got it's all ready to start online?
Yeah, we're
Okay, we're live. Okay. Well, great. Well, we won't.
here.
Is that Al?
I think so.
Oh, wow. He moved fast. He didn't even know.
Yep.
He made it.
Went to the wrong building.
Evergreen. Yeah, habit is a wonderful
That
thing.
was odd, nobody was there.
Yeah, that's what I had a feeling.
I'm mistaken entirely, sorry.
It happens. I did the same thing last night. My husband and I agreed where we were gonna go to dinner, but we had talked about two places. And I went to the place that was in my head and I'm pulling in the parking lot going, oh yeah, we were gonna go to the other place. Duh. Well, welcome everybody. We will call the meeting to order now. Thank you everybody for being here. My name's Kathy Sexton. We'll spend the day, the meeting going through some proposed amendments, asking questions, getting clarification, what have you. We do expect Lucretia in 5 or 10 minutes. And so that's good too. Constance could not be here tonight. And of course, we do have one seat open, District 3, because Big Jeannie Little moved out of town. So she had to leave us in July. So minutes of the July 10 meeting are before you. Any motion to adopt, to approve those minutes or any questions about those minutes?
I move to approve.
I second it.
All right, Dennis and Kristen any questions, concerns? All those in favor say aye.
Alright,
Opposed, motion carries 4-0. And we will jump into the ordinance, which was sent to you in advance to hopefully look at, but also printed off there for you in a marked up format. And I'm just gonna go through it and just speak up anytime if it doesn't make sense or if questions or you think there's a better way to word things, whatever, that's awesome. I inserted 4 city officials in that title of the ordinance for clarity because we do have people sometimes complaining about city staff. And then I have to redirect them to other people. And just so I thought, let's just make that real clear right up front. And the other stuff, under purpose on page 1 there, I just moved that phrase, provide procedures for investigating alleged violations up to the purpose statement in the first line, just for clarity of the chapter, doesn't just establish the code. As you guys know, the code is only like 2 pages of the whole document. The rest of the whole document is about the procedures. So I just thought it was a clarity thing, not substantive at all. If there's nothing else on page 1 for now, we'll go to page 2 and we're recommending deleting this paragraph. And so when we move from a policy to an ordinance a little over a year ago, this was a new paragraph that was added at that time. And I think it's one we just did not fully vet. We thought we needed it to clarify what was in charge, which piece of the code, municipal code, would be, ruling or what would outweigh a different thing. But every once in a while it's come up and John and Jennifer Ngania, the city attorney, would talk through it and go, I don't think this makes any sense. And the last time we talked about it, we said, I don't think we need this at all. So this removing it is a clarification thing. And that's all on that page. And page 3, after we go through most of the definitions here, we actually inserted a new section K for a new definition for burden of proof. And that being preponderance of evidence, or in other words, the claim is more probably true than not true. Having been in executive session when we've talked about various cases, that's something that John always explains to you all of kind of the different levels of proof, because you're always faced with, we have this claim and this other claim, and how do we know? And you look at the evidence, but then sometimes there's no smoking gun definite evidence. It's like the preponderance of the evidence, and the claim is more probably true than not true. inserting that at the mayor's request. That was something you may or may not recall that came up in, I think the last case we dealt with, and she had asked in her appeal document or request for additional review that what level of burden of proof we're using to make decisions be clarified. So putting that in there.
That's essentially what we were doing anyway. Nothing.
Yeah. It's not changing anything other than putting it in the ordinance so everybody knows how the decisions are being made. The last line, city officials shall, is the way it read before, and then it had all this list of things from code. And what we did was just for clarity said shall conduct themselves in keeping with the following. And when you turn over to page 4, you see that we suggested that A and B be deleted. And A is the first thing in the code of ethics, A. B, dedicated to the ideals of honor and integrity in all public and personal relationships. And B, conduct themselves so as to maintain public confidence in the city and its officials. Many of you know, you've done several cases now, you know that those two get cited more than any other. And those two are the most generically worded, most open to interpretation. And I think the idea of eliminating them makes, and some further edits, makes it a little more clear for people who are filing complaints of the level of accusation they need to be making, and not just put the burden on you all to decide, well, what's an ideal of honor and integrity, you know, for number A, or on B, what's public confidence? Is that 5 members of the public or 500 or 5,000 or what? So eliminating those two, but putting that conduct language in the intro, conduct themselves in keeping with the following, just makes it clear this is about conduct, not your beliefs, and trying to clarify that as we go through. If it feels like I'm reading to you, I apologize. I am trying to make it, you know, for people who are watching, and if anybody watches the video later, they know what we're talking about since they don't have the document in front of them. Also kind of to keep us all on the same page, right? So new A on the first part then of the code of conduct or code of ethics would be that city officials not engage in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, misrepresentation, or which reflects adversely on the, you might say, or conduct that reflects, I don't know, think about that, John. Just for clear, just for smooth, or conduct which reflects adversely on the official's honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness as a city official. John found that edit earlier today when he was reviewing it. Instead of an elected official, put a city official, because it does apply to all the city officials, which is the appointed board and commission folks, as well as 7 electeds. So not have been convicted of a felony, or while serving as a city official, be convicted while serving as a city official, be convicted of any crime that reflects adversely on the official's honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness as a city official. Again, that one instead of an elected in other respects. So as soon as you take out A and B, you realize you don't have any catch-all areas. And literally, I should tell you that when I first made some markups and kind of I told all the council members, all 7 elected officials, that, hey, this board is going to be working on this. Does anybody have any requests or concerns or want to talk about this? So a couple of them took me up on that. And one of them caught that and said, you know, if you take away the catch-all, what's to say someone couldn't break the law while they're a seated official, and there's nothing in here that would apply to? And I was like, good catch. And of course, as it says in the little comments on the side too, you as members of the ethics board cannot have been convicted of a crime. And so, and moral turpitude is the thing used. We took out the moral turpitude. Again, one of the elected officials said to me when I'm sitting there talking to him, like, what does that mean? And I'm like, that's a legal thing. We'll have to define it. And then John came up, because he's brilliant. He came up with a brilliant idea of, let's just take the word out and define it. And that's what A does. Things like dishonesty and fraud and deceit. I mean, you would then have something more solid to make a decision on, and people would have more clarity about what they can. I mean, people complaining don't know what turpitude means either. So
There's almost no examples of
yeah.
the use of moral turpitude. left in the legal profession. There's a couple, but one's like an immigration law, West Virginia, California, Iowa. And then even, I sort of fashioned this a little bit after the rules of professional conduct for attorneys. And they don't mention moral turpitude in the actual code language. It's mentioned in the comments, but the problem is it can include adultery or things that, while you may not appreciate or find distasteful, some might say wouldn't disqualify you from certain things. So adding a little more definition to what we're talking about, rather than using a general ill-defined term.
Yeah. So B is sort of new as well. B is refrain from retaliating against anyone who files an ethics complaint, serves as a witness in an investigation, or otherwise provides evidence or information regarding such complaint. So currently, the ordinance at the very end has a section all about whistleblower. And although it's a long paragraph, there's pretty much one line in there that applies, and that is these city officials cannot retaliate against someone who files a complaint. We've added in, for your consideration here, serves as a witness or otherwise provides evidence. And I think we did that after the experience we had with a couple of several cases where we were calling on city employees to tell us what you saw, tell us what you heard, and that puts city employees in a very precarious situation. And, you know, some of them were nervous about talking to us. Some of them were able to get an attorney to come with them so that they didn't feel that power imbalance of, oh, what am I in? You know, and we just thought, you know, we need to say right up front that if you're accused of something, and just because an employee is being called as a witness, you better make sure you're not retaliating. Because then when you put this in, if there is something that was retaliation, of course, they could be written up as a complaint on that, where we didn't really have it. So that does broaden, you know, a little bit. But I think it's, I mean, there were really times when I thought, oh, I hate doing this. So this is, I think, a good thing. C, pretty much is taken out that make it their duty to improve operations and productivity, because it's not really an elected official's job to get into operations and productivity. And one of the electeds pointed that out to me, and I thought, well, that's a good point. Just taking off that early phrase, then the C item still reads, use time wisely so citizens know full value is being received for each tax dollar spent, which is the gist of it anyway. So that's a rewrite, but not a big deal, I don't think. E is just a typo, and then followed by financially, because someone did point out to me that, oh, this was months ago. Because what I do is I just keep a paper copy, and every time something comes up, I make a note in the margin of like, we should fix this, or so-and-so said this is weird or whatever. Well, this one was someone who was involved in the original writing of the policy in 2021 said, you know, we really kind of meant financially benefit, not like you should have to interpret what does benefit mean. So E is ensure expenditures made by the city are in the interest of the city for the betterment of the city and only for appropriate city business, and refrain from actions unreasonably benefiting specific groups or individuals at the expense of the city as a whole. So just we inserted the word financially, so it's clear that that's a pretty narrow item that you could complain about. You'd have to really show someone had financial gain. But that apparently, I'm told, was the original intent. So flipping over to the next page on 5, and Lucretia is here. Hello. On page 5, G, reasonably, we inserted the word reasonably, address the concerns of residents using the various methods available to city officials. We've got a spot for you right there. Sorry about that. So a couple things changed in this one. We thought residents sounded better than constituents, just for the clarity of who are constituents. Some people, you know, you think of in the electoral sense of people who vote, people who voted for me, maybe, but certainly people who vote. But residents is everybody.
District.
Yeah, exactly. And to make it clear, obviously, even though they're elected by district, they
The
officials.
code of conduct changes to
Oh, okay.
On page 5.
This is another one that should say city officials instead of elected in the blue, new language. And then we put reasonably, because we did have one case where it was a matter of the elected officials said, well, here's all the things we did, but the complainant was like, well, that's not good enough. And so we were able to say, well, at what point does the board think is good enough? The elected official did things. And so that's why we put reasonably, because we thought that would give everybody a little more guidance on how to.
And there's more than one way to address residents' concerns than.
Yeah, you may not do exactly what they wanted, but if you tried to address their concerns and you can show that in your response, you just felt like that was a nice clarification. Now on H, we have the first one where I wasn't sure if we wanted to write something or how to write it, so I highlighted it in yellow. H is working for full cooperation with other officials and employees as they carry out their lawful discharge of duties. I don't have an edit on that one other than we broke it into two, H and I, because before it said and refrain from requesting correction of municipal code violation, including but not limited to fixing our traffic tickets. You'll remember we had a case on this one and it was like, why are these two things in a compound sentence when they're kind of different things? And so we broke it up, and then a different official said to me when they read it, you know, they said, well, let's see, what was that one? Call my attention to elected. Oh yeah, well, you know, people are running right now against incumbents, and you know, maybe one of the other electeds is working against an incumbent. You know, they're supporting a challenger. And would that mean I'm not working in full cooperation with other officials? And I was like, no, that's not something you're doing at City Hall on city time. That's your personal time. No one should think that they, free speech wise, wouldn't have the right to do whatever you want. But this is about city business. This is like during council meetings. And as you all know, probably the employees part's easy. You know, if a police officer says, drive this way, you drive that way, right? And if you argue with them and don't drive that way, then you're not cooperating with an employee. But it was the other official part. And I think, honestly, after we talked about it, I think that elected official understood it better and is fine. But again, I wanted to run it by you all to see if you had any other thoughts on this section.
I appreciate it being separated. I think that makes more sense.
I see his point, but I understand what it means. I don't know how you make it. I mean, it gets awkward when you say work in full cooperation during the course of your official duties with other officials, employees as they carry out lawful discharge of their duties. Is that what the meaning should be clarified?
Oh,
That's a lot of official duties.
yeah.
I don't know if you need that clarification, but is that what they were unsure that it said?
Well, what was brought up was, I don't agree politically with some of my colleagues on the bench, so I don't do what they want. And I'm like, it's not about doing what they want, it's about being cordial and civil and, you know.
Yes.
But the example was, in fact, I am, you know, I'm working on somebody else's campaign, or I don't support that person and the way they believe, so is this making me, and I'm like, I
That's
don't.
not official city
It's
business.
right, it's not your official, yeah.
Yeah. And what did you suggest, John?
I understand what it means, but if you're really going to belts and suspender it,
Mm-hmm.
you might say during the course, I mean, I don't hate to use your, but during the course of your official duties, work in full cooperation with other officials.
Yeah, during the course of city officials performing their official duties. Comma, work in full cooperation with other officials and employees as they carry out their lawful. You know, that's not bad because the they then clearly is referring to the other officials and employees. And makes it clear that it's what you're doing in the course of your official duties, not in, as it is now, open to interpretation. I thought work did it, but instead of act, but I can see how it got there. Okay, anything else on that one? The gift, just adding the S on K, I just thought was kind of an oversight because you have to, put all the gifts on the form. So. And we switch over to page 7 here. And
Clean page.
I know, isn't that fun? Okay, so let's see, number 2. So this is M2 and it says the mayor, oh yeah, this one. The mayor, city council members or their relatives attending an event or meeting hosted by a nonprofit, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is the one that the only paragraph, the only requirement in this whole document that only applies to the 7 elected officials does not apply to the 300 board and commission volunteers. And that's why I just thought, do we really need to make a separate standard for them? So this would just say, if we were to change it, that any of the city officials or their relatives could attend an event. Okay, I should go back up. So M is about avoiding improper influence. You can't receive gifts. And then toward the, this is an exception. So an L1 is an official may accept an honor or award presented at one of these groups or performance of their duty, that kind of thing. And then the second exception is that the elected officials can attend an event hosted by these nonprofits and educational government, et cetera, if they're requested to be there, and the official and the relatives may accept the complimentary meal, food, and admission to the event. So if we leave it like that, that means every once in a while I get a call from a city staff person or board member who's a volunteer board member, and they go, I can't go to this thing and take, like I'm supposed to pay $50 to get in, and or I can't eat the meal that I'm, at this, and I'm like, it doesn't happen very often. And I just thought, since it doesn't happen very often, does anybody really think that should be, restricted for volunteers? So I don't know if you guys have any input on that. Obviously, it's council's call, but I think they'll be looking to see if, as a board, if you have any recommendation to change it or.
I was more focused on the term relatives. 'Cause
Yeah.
That's pretty broad.
It is. Yeah, and we went through that a while back, and that's when we added that or defined it, put it throughout the document, we realized, okay, I think what we added last year was that the elected official has to inform their relatives of these requirements. But that's a good point. If you broaden it to include all those board members, it's their relatives too.
And you're
So
assuming. Like when people hear the word relative, they're thinking about household. And then you're making the assumption that all your relatives agree with you. You could absolutely have a situation where your quote relative, whether it's a sibling or your third cousin, doesn't agree with you. I can go to this, do this, and then file the ethics complaint against you.
that's a good point. It would actually,
And it would
that's an
have-
argument for changing it, isn't it? I was
Well, it
confused
just
there at the
needs to be
beginning.
defined.
Well,
Like
Something.
for relative.
Yeah.
houses, yeah.
well, no, it's on page 3 in our definitions.
I would argue.
Spouse, domestic partner,
You have
child,
it.
mother, father.
This is define it.
Yeah, page 3, J. In-laws, siblings, grandparents, grandchild, any family member living in the same household. So if we change this to cover all the board members, then we don't ever have to worry about it, a relative and what they're doing and how that works. And so I guess, because it's an exception that you'd be adding for all those board members. That's a really good point, Justin. It hasn't come up, but like maybe once or twice for me. And honestly,
I think it's a definite false assumption to think that someone with an adult child you could tell them this is what you're not going to do.
Oh.
They go ahead and do it, and actually, how do you have any say over what they do?
It's a pretty high standard for a volunteer on a board who meets a couple times a year, you know.
Well, I think I think if I was a volunteer, I would just leave on that if your child's not gonna listen to you. But
Okay, so I'm gonna write this up for a recommended edit to include the boards. That way, they have the same exception. And that if someone is seen at some event, it's not gonna be cause for an investigation.
And that seems congruent with the intent of the rest of the ordinance, right? Because this is, if I heard correctly, the only exception.
It's the
where
only
it comes-
exception, and we honestly don't really know. I mean, I'll ask Jennifer, but I don't think I've ever gotten the impression that anybody who was around during the drafting thought that that was and maybe a council member or two might know, but thought that that was a real thing that they really wanted to make clear.
They're just assuming it didn't even occur to them
Yeah.
that it would apply.
I don't think it was an issue of conversation or anything. So this would also do what we're trying to do is make this not quite so strict and make it to where we hopefully have less to do in terms of the clarity of, let's not nitpick people to death, especially volunteers. Include the boards. And I'm gonna put relatives over there, as that's a really good reason. Thank you, Justin, for that. Going down on that same page, R, refrain from patronage and do not interfere with this, what was called the city's hiring process. This one is proposed for your consideration to also expand, and that would be do not interfere with administration of the city's personnel policies or processes beyond bringing issues to the attention of the city manager and overseeing the city manager. So what that does is right now it's interfere with or express improper interest in the hiring process. Well, one of the elected officials literally said to me, "What's improper interest?" I was like,
But when you see it, it's like access.
And pornography.
because if you think about improper like involvement, but an interest is like, I care about who we hire for, you know, the park department or
Part of the
whatever.
screenplay.
I care, as opposed to I'm involved and I'm telling the manager hire this person, or I say I want to be on the committee, or I want to hire, you know. And so that's the part about taking out the words express improper interest. And then the part about administration of the city's personnel policies basically kind of came from the comment made to me was, not only are we not involved in hiring, but we're not involved in any of that level of detail about, you know, whether it be hiring, whether it be discipline, duties, assignments, firing, whatever. So our job is to bring issues to the attention of the city manager. And I thought, that's a really good point. That's what we should write in there, you know, as a reminder. And so honestly, for the public, so when they read it, they don't expect their elected official to like go fix a problem employee or whatever, but no, they should expect them to bring that to the city manager. And then the last thing I wrote there was overseeing the city manager, because that is clearly the role of the city council. And they, you know, that's big. That's a big role, right? But it is broader. The way I'm proposing it is broader from just hiring. Right? And patronage is in your definitions early on. I gotta remember what it says, but it is officials' act of breaching their official authority to unduly influence appointment of a person to a city office. So hiring or appointing, if that's not an employee. So we'll keep that one there unless anybody has other thoughts. And so that we, hey, Al, we get to skip page 8. Leave off. Page 9, we're moving right along here, yeah. A few more pages, aren't there? Page 9, so this is the ethics board, you all, the people on this board. These are the requirements, and I always remind city council members when they have vacancy that they have a list in their code of all the things an appointment to any board has to be, but these are above and beyond. Yeah, above and beyond. And so number 5 is the one we thought maybe some edits should be made to, and that's the moral turpitude thing. And so when you take out that you all may not have been convicted of a felony or a crime of moral turpitude, we define that as a felony or any crime that reflects adversely on your honesty, trustworthiness, fitness in other respects, or may not be engaged in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation, or which reflects adversely on your honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness as a city official in other respects. That's a lot. Yeah.
It does seem like a lot, doesn't it?
Okay, I know what it is. It says a crime that's da-da-da, and the second part is not a crime. Engaged in conduct.
Yeah.
So that way, if somebody on the ethics board or somebody being considered for the ethics board didn't actually get convicted of crime, as is the first and second phrases, the last phrase is the catch-all, which is that you engaged in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation, but it wasn't actually a crime. But it would be something that would be, I guess, well documented enough to know that, well, we don't want that person on our ethics board. Okay, and blank page, so we're on 11. G1. Okay, just a little cleanup language there. There were 3 things in a series, so I made an ABC just to kind of clarify them. And then ethics must, an alleged violation of the code must be made in writing using the prescribed form, and we inserted for your consideration the words, including having cited a specific section of the Code of Ethics. Early on, when John and I first started doing this, there was no form. Lucretia remembers, there was no form. So we made the form, and then it was policy. So we said, you have to fill out the form. And then we made it an ordinance, and it says you have to fill out the form. But then we thought, we need to be clear, because some people fill out the form like in handwriting, and then I can't read like their address or their email address or some things. And then, some people don't, they kind of skip over the part that says like state what part you're complaining about. So we thought, that's the most critical thing on the form, is to read the code and say what it is you think they're doing wrong. And so we thought maybe we should just add that, including having cited a specific section of the Code of Ethics.
That helps us.
And I think it helps people as they discern whether they're really going to fill out the form. Yeah, that's what I've observed, because sometimes people will email or call, in which case I get it out and I was like, well, here's what, and here's and let me send you the form, but they tell me what they're concerned about. And I'll say, well, I don't really know that fits anything in the Code of Ethics, but here you look at it and you decide. Or I'll say, well, yeah, that probably fits this one, whatever. But I think just saying it in there, once you get this in front of people, a lot of people read this and walk through it. I mean, not everybody will, but we're requiring it on the form now. But I just thought, maybe it ought to be in the ordinance. And then further down in that same section, we insert complaints based on the complainant's disagreement with a city official's beliefs, statements, or voting record are insufficient to warrant investigation. Now that part is trying to educate people about filing their complaints, and it reflects what the ethics board has put in a couple of reports this past year, saying, quote, the ethics board makes no judgment about policy matters addressed by legislative bodies of the city, and trying to let those complainants know, and obviously the news media was pretty active on some of these cases, helping people understand that the issue that you're all worked up about isn't our issue. If it's elected officials decide they want to do X or Y and it's a split vote, some believe X and some believe Y, that's why you elect them. It's not an ethical issue to say you don't disagree with their morals or their beliefs or their politics. So that was the attempt to throw that in there, which I hadn't really thought of at first, but the more this came out, I thought, you can't expect people to go back to ethics board's reports and learn from what we wrote and made public documents at the time. So that was the attempt here. And the last new sentence in this section is, if a complaint is determined to be insufficient, the ethics officer shall inform the complainant of the reason for the decision and the complainant's right to appeal to the ethics board for reconsideration. Now that is when you all don't even see these complaints. So that's when they literally fill out the form because someone said, hey, there's a form, or they found it online or whatever. And then I get it and go, right above it, the words are, I'm supposed to look at this to find out, is it complete or incomplete? Is it frivolous or groundless on its face, or does it fail to state a violation of the code of ethics? So I don't, decline very many. And if it's not very obvious, like if it's just missing something, I always try to reach them and say, this isn't, and they'll send it back in. But like I said, I have had, especially this past year, when one complaint was like, 35 different people. That's a lot of, well, some of them I couldn't get a hold of them. Some of them didn't put an email. And so then I'm trying to call their cell and I can't, it's not legible. I can't read it. So those ones, officially I turned them down, but really I couldn't tell them because I couldn't get a hold of them. But in this, what I'm adding here is that I would just have to inform the complainant of the reason why their decision that we determined it was not going to go to the board for investigation. And then tell them that they can appeal that decision. It's elsewhere in the document that says an opinion of the ethics officer can be appealed to this board. No one's really argued. I've only had a few. And when I tell them, they're disappointed, but they never say, well, I want to go over your head, or who do I go to next? And if they would, I would say, oh, well, we can take it to the board and they can decide. I've kind of been prepared for that on a couple of them, but no one really kind of pushed it. I thought, I think it's really better to say that in the ordinance so that people reading the ordinance know that it's not just one person and then they're dead in the water. They can appeal it to you all. So clarifies that, makes it obvious to the public. Next page, 12, under number 3, so it's E3. Let's just say we added this, let's see, what is this? The respondent shall have 7 days. Okay, for another clarity thing, this is for, it's in there that, well, I don't know that it's specifically stated in the ordinance, but basically, every time you guys go into executive session and you read a complaint and you start reading that, go, ooh, this is like my best friend's mom, then you should just, at that time in the executive session, say, hey, I have a conflict. I'm going to stop reading. I'm going to leave. Sometimes I thought about saying, hey, everybody can declare your conflict before you, but then other times I don't think about it in executive session. So I know some of you haven't heard me say that very much. So I thought, let's put that in the ordinance so that somebody remembers that and we recall that, anytime you feel like you have a conflict, once you start reading and see who's complaining or see the issue, and if it's something you're involved in, then you would say, I'm out. Page 13, number 5. This, okay, when we changed this from a policy to an ordinance, one of the things we did last year is we realized, 7 days isn't very much time for an elected official to respond. And we're a board member because they're volunteers. I mean, they have real jobs. And so that's not very much time. And so we changed it to 7 business days, gave them a little more time. And then we also inserted a thing in an earlier section that says if they need more time, they ask me when I tell them, hey, I need this by next Tuesday, they can say, ooh, mom's in the hospital, or it's Christmas, or I'm out of town, or I got a cruise scheduled, whatever it is. And I can say, oh, I'll give you 14 days. Well, this time it came up. And so that's in the previous section. We added that 14-day thing. This time it came up and it wasn't the initial response from the elected official. It was their appeal. It was their request for reconsideration. I just happened to know that elected official was overseas. And I thought, oh, I'll give her another week. And then I went to look so I could quote exactly, and I was going to send her an email and say, I'll give you 7 more days. And I couldn't find it. So we had put the 14 days in the original, but we didn't put it in the appeal section. Yeah, the second. So I just thought, I think we should just give them the 14 days. It's consistent that way. And nobody wants to drag these things out, so, but if you've got something else major going on, like out of town or something, it's, yeah. Okay, now in yellow, to discuss, any evidence collected during the, oh yeah, any evidence collected during the investigation will be retained for the length of the official's term. This isn't a huge thing for discussion with you all. It was more a matter of highlighting it because there's a few things in here we need to discuss with legal staff when we're rewriting this. What we wondered is, okay, this is sort of stuck in there, but the city has like official retention policies about, it's like, I made a copy of it. It's like this list of all these things and how long they're retained. And we thought, well, we're gonna talk to legal about, do we keep it in here or do we also put it in the retention policy or do we take it out of here? Whatever, but
Rely on existing retention plans.
yeah, or does that, or do the existing retention policies cover it? And we don't need to put it in here at all.
I hate to run, I hate to have something inconsistent with it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
have they thought about that?
because there are reasons to have retention policies that are beyond.
Yeah, and sometimes when they write ordinances, they like to put everything about the subject in that ordinance. But then if there's other places it needs to be put so that it shows up on both, so
Yeah.
people don't go, well, I didn't know there were two documents, but I didn't know that document existed. I was looking at this. So we just want to talk to legal about making sure that's real clear about where it goes. Now, section 5, page 14. This is that current section that is, actually, it's the red on page 15, whistleblower, that we crossed the whole thing out. And we inserted what needed to be earlier, but most of this doesn't need to be because even it says things like an employee shall do this or that. Well, that has nothing to do with this group. And so we thought a lot of this can just come out. Now, what I thought I would use that empty section 5 for then is what I added in blue and then we scratched out. But you can see the comments there. We tried to add the new section on public records to clarify, because this is all a new effort, how long is this stuff going to be kept? So one, we thought, okay, we should retain permanently all the actual complaint that was investigated and came to this board for a decision. And then also the city official's response, as well as the report of the ethics board. So kind of just saying, these are the 3 public documents that come out of any valid complaint. And those 3 documents will be retained permanently. And then, of course, John put the comment in blue on the side, and I think everybody has color copies, right? So John's comment was, well, they have a document retention policy, so we need to talk to them about, should this really be in here or should it be somewhere else or what? And that's why then I struck out the new blue idea, but really we just need to talk to legal about it and see where should it be. And this one. Oh, yeah. So then at the top of 15 is in red. Reports of the ethics board. So in addition to those 3 being public documents retained by the city in case anyone files a CORA request and wants a public document, this next paragraph is making what we're making available to the public on the website. So this is the report of the board, which, as you know, the ordinance requires you all to summarize. Here's the complaint. Here's what the official said. Here's the summary of the evidence that we had looked at. And then here's our decision and how we came to that decision. So the report of the board is pretty valuable document without having to have all the other documents. So the report will be made available to the public on the website for the duration of any term of office held by that city official. Then the reports, if you don't find a violation, then those would be removed from the website when that official is no longer in office. So the reason we came up with that, honestly, this came from discussion with an elected official who said, think about this. When we first started this, there was one against Brian Fry, and it was found not to be he was exonerated from it but he's no longer on city council. But that report is still out there. And so it was that sort of the internet savvy person who's saying, how easy it is to find stuff when you're running a search, or AI now finds stuff with just like his name. And this isn't about Brian, it was just a really good example. But the whole idea of, okay, Brandon Johnson's gonna go off council after, a few more months. And so the idea would be that if you're exonerated, like Brian was, that would come off the website. But the ones that would, and that way, how the list on the website just keeps getting longer, right? So essentially, when people aren't in elected office at the city of Wichita anymore, then you take those off, and that way your website continues to be a nice summary of what's going on without going back in history when they were exonerated. But obviously, if they weren't exonerated, and so they were found to have violated the code, that would stay on.
This is a very good change.
Yeah.
Wish more would do that.
Yeah, no kidding. Everything's findable. Some of these have had extensive media coverage. Obviously, that stuff's out there. It's still public documents. If somebody, say someone who went off council decides to run for something later, obviously people are gonna do research on him. Stuff will come up, but it's just, we're not pushing the report out to the public.
It's almost like an expungement provision in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Or like,
But the city clerk would still have them, and people could still do a core request and get them for anyone that was exonerated, and to show, well, what was the case? What was the allegation and the evidence and that kind of thing, so. Is that it? One more page? Okay. Okay, we took out the whistleblower stuff, and yeah, so the last page, I don't have anything new on that, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think there's anything new on that last page. I think we've covered it all. What do you want to talk about?
I'd be finally happy with page four,
For.
paragraph A,
Mhm.
after reading it side by side with paragraph 5 and 9. I kind of like how we said it on page 9, because it is a bit confusing now. I would probably rewrite it to
Okay.
be more like 5, because it makes sense to start out, can't be convicted of a felony.
Hmm.
Can't be convicted of a crime that reflects adversely on their honesty, trustworthiness, or fitness in other respects, or engage in contact involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, etc. It's kind of a hierarchy in order of severity. It just reads better in paragraph 5. I think paragraph A is confusing now that I go back to
That's a
it.
good point.
and John, would you think that both of those paragraphs could effectively be the same copy?
I think so.
Yeah, I agree.
I think so.
Consistency is a good thing.
I can't remember why I drafted them differently. I might have had a reason, but sitting here today, I don't have one, because convicted of a felony, period. Or convicted of a crime. So, you can't just say convicted of any crime. Because there are certain crimes that one might have a good argument wouldn't disqualify you.
Sure.
So that's why kind of if you dovetail it with how we do things in the legal profession, that crime involving just any felony or crime involving dishonesty, et cetera.
Mhm.
But I think we also want to be able to evaluate conduct in general
Mhm.
that fits those criteria. So that's kind of why it seems a little repetitive, but
I kind of like the idea of splitting up the sentence too, instead of having a series of 3, make them 3 shorter sentences.
yeah, I think there's a way I could probably do that to have it make it
Now
more
that's
sense.
easier for people to understand sometimes. May not have been, because I heard it when
I
you did that
dovetailed
period.
how code section's written, but
Mhm.
in hindsight, that's not necessarily helpful to people who aren't lawyers. So I think I can probably come up with a version that's succinct,
Mhm.
a little user friendly. If that's okay with you, but if you have any questions about its meaning, I intend to cover both convicted of felony or convicted of these variety of crimes or behavior that falls within these categories in general. It's kind of, I think, the intent, right?
Okay.
But there's gotta be a better way to do it. Having heard it read aloud, I'm embarrassed that it was kind of,
Well,
it
Doc,
makes sense when I read it.
Yeah.
But when it's read aloud, I'm like,
Well, we've got through this all pretty fast, but does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns?
yeah, did I hear you say that this draft has gone before the elected city council and maybe senior staff?
No.
Oh, I thought,
No, so before we got to this, I just sent him an email and said, okay, we don't have any complaints. The next few months, we're gonna work on edits. I think it was an email that kind of said, here's the general gist of what we're looking at. But if you have any concerns or questions, because I knew that the mayor had concern that she had given us. And I want to give them all the opportunity to say, hey, I've got a concern too. So a couple of them, said, hey, think about this, or come see me and talk about this. So, we just sat there and kind of talked through, and they just said, well, what does this mean? And I don't understand what this means, that kind of thing. Then we did this draft,
okay,
and then I gave it to John, and then he made edits, and I made more edits. And so, what we need to do now is work on this a little more, then go to city legal staff on these few issues that we said we really need to talk to staff. And then we would have a clean copy that we would need to have another meeting with you all, review what's changed, ask you to vote. Because the council wants to know that the board, what does the board recommend to them? And also, the council has an election in November where they will have one or maybe two or maybe three new members starting in like mid-January. So the idea is not to take this to them to vote on until the new council is seated, since they're the ones that are gonna be affected by it, and you don't want kind of a lame duck, to do something like that. So we have time, and as the agenda says, the next meeting we have planned is November 13th. But that's gonna come pretty fast, and if city legal's pretty busy and can't get to it that fast, then we'd probably cancel that and bring it to you all as a final on the December 11th meeting, which is on your calendars. Unless anybody has any conflicts with that, in which case we would have to move that, and we could, I hate to do it in January, but I'm not gonna take this to council as soon as they start either. It might go to them in February, depending on, what I'll have to do is I'll have to go in and brief each one individually, especially the new people who will need the full briefing, which I would have done anyway, of the regular ordinance, just so they know about the ethics ordinance. So this way I'll put it in the form of, here's what we're changing and why.
so you'll check with legal and see how fast maybe they can reflect on this and let us know.
Yes,
Okay,
and if they need more time or we need more time, then we'll cancel the November 13th meeting, just skip that month and ask you to come in in December to finalize it. And hopefully we won't have anything else on our agenda, and it would be a relatively
is this
fast.
the first time we've had a major adjustment in
Well,
4 years?
no, when we first started, we did a cleanup on the policy, but it was just a policy. And then last year, we changed it to an ordinance. And when we changed it to an ordinance, we cleaned up and fixed a few things based on our early history of the first few cases. And of course now, and so that was approved, what we have now was approved September of 2024. And then we've done a bunch of cases. And now we have, I think these are pretty minor changes compared to the last two times we did it.
Oh, I do.
Yeah,
I do, but I just want to thank you for the legwork. I feel like it captures meaningful updates of lessons learned, feedback.
I can't, I can't imagine them drafting it in the beginning, because you just don't know what you're gonna be dealing with. And so the learnings as we've, what do you call that, on the job training. We've learned as we've gone about, this is a weird way to read it, write it, enforce it, so. Thank you very much, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you reflect and think of something, let me know. Otherwise, we'll plow through it and we'll let you know if we're gonna have or cancel the November meeting.
This is perfect. I mean, I remember.
You do remember, don't you?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was reflecting on that coming into the meeting, thinking, nobody but Lucretia on the board now remembers how much we have
How much work that was.
rewritten and
Yes.
redrafted and thought about. Cause they put a lot of procedures in the policy to start with, so it's like, but now it's like, well, now you realize the value of that, because then people see what's happening and they understand it better, right? So, well, thank you all for your time tonight. I think
Thank
we're
you.
gonna adjourn here at 7:02-ish. And,
I'm sure that we made it on time. I'm
yes,
sure.
we did. Did good. We did motions to adjourn, I think we did.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn, Dennis, and seconded by
Kristen.
Kristen. You guys are on top of it tonight. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a good month. We'll see you next time.
Happy Halloween. everyone.
Oh, I didn't know you were.
There you go.
I was really trying to get it, girl.
Yeah.
I told, 15 minutes.
Uh,